All right, so hello and welcome to the second session of the workshop on banking, tax, and American law organized by Collegiate in collaboration with Boston University School of Law. In today's session, you can go ahead and ask literally anything that you want about these areas of law and also about an LLM at Boston University. On that note, I am happy to introduce our speakers for today, Anmol Sheth, Parvesh Baba, and Trisha Mukherjee. Anmol graduated from Boston University in 2021 with an LLM in American law, and she is currently working as a law clerk with Davis Polk in New York. Parvesh Baba graduated in 2020 from ILS Pune, and he is currently pursuing an LLM in tax law. Trisha also graduated in 2020 from AIL Mohali, and she is pursuing an LLM in banking and financial law from Boston University. Guys, thank you so much for taking our time for today's session. It's great to have you here, and I'm really looking forward to our discussion.
Thank you for having us.
Great. So just two things before we proceed. First, certificates signed by Boston University and Collegiate will be provided to those who attend the sessions. Just a reminder that the next and the last session is on 2nd April, that's a Saturday at 12:30 p.m. Secondly, Boston University has graciously offered to provide application fee waivers to those of you who wish to apply for an LLM at BU Law. The last date to apply is 15th April if you wish to secure a spot in their Fall 22 cohort. Please reach out to us at info@collegiate.org if you want us to expedite the process for this waiver, and we'll be happy to help you out. All right, so without further ado, I will go ahead and put up the questions on the screen. Okay, so today we'll be talking about a number of things. We'll be talking about how to shortlist universities, the kind of grades and academic achievements that you need for BU Law, the relevance of work experience for an application, taking the New York bar exam, and scholarships and financial aid. At any juncture, if anyone in the audience has any questions, please, you can use the chat box, you can unmute yourself, whatever works for you, and you can participate in the discussion. But for now, let's go ahead and start with the session. So first off, shortlisting universities. Yeah, I'll just go ahead and mute the audience. I think that's a tiny bit of an issue right now. Sorry, just give me 1 second. Okay, so we're back on track. All right, so first off, this is something that I want to ask all of you. So what were the factors which you considered in shortlisting universities, and what were the universities that you ended up shortlisting? This is to understand the reasons why you chose BU Law. In later on in the session, we can look at the reasons why you chose a particular program. But for now, I just want to understand why you decided to go with BU Law and what were the universities that you ended up shortlisting. So Trisha, why don't you take this one first, and then we can move to Parvesh and Anmol as well.
I'll be happy to do that. So when I was shortlisting my universities, I personally wanted to look into, so I made a Word document in which I divided my colleges into, I think, 5 to 6 columns. And the first column was the rank of the college, but then it doesn't matter when it comes to when it comes to US colleges. The second was how the application goes on. What is the criteria? What do they look into? Is it entirely based on the grading, or is it based on the CV, or is it based on the work experience? The third thing which I looked was into the financial aid, how well that fits into my budget, and how well I'm going to pursue my course in the future, and how I'm going to take the education loan, and what all the things are included in the financial aid. The fourth one was the what kind of professional development does the college offers me after once I'm done with the course, or I am doing the course, or during the transit of this thing. And the fifth would be the specialization each and every college is providing me, and how is it going to help me in the future. The sixth was the location. How is the location advantage giving me an advantage when I'm pursuing this course? So yes, these were the criteria in which I divided my colleges into.
And what were the universities that you eventually came up with in your shortlist?
There were a lot of colleges which I came into. So firstly, I got my GPA calculated, because the GPA matters a lot when it comes to the Indian college system. Once that was done, I started looking for colleges which were providing the acceptance letter during the spring. I did not apply during the fall. I applied for the spring. So for me, it was a little difficult because I had a very less gateways to the colleges, but there were many colleges which were really good, like George Washington University School of Law, then Boston University School of Law, USC Gold School of Law, and then I had, I think, Arizona State University, Texas A&M. Then I had, I think, Columbia. I applied for Columbia, and then there was Cornell, and all these colleges I shortlisted according to my comfortability.
All right. Thank you for that. And Parvesh, what were your thoughts about this? How did you go about shortlisting universities, and how did you decide that Boston was right for you? Yeah.
So like this is a two-part answer for me, but I had a different process, and I would recommend people use a different process. For me, I think it was so there are not many tax programs in the US, and the US wasn't really on my radar. But I think my parents were the ones who decided to like spread out my applications across the globe. And BU, I sort of wasn't really looking at applying to, but the reason I ended up applying there was I was doing a lot of research, and I realized a lot of the staff from BU usually move on, and they're usually like a lot of them are interconnected. So I could see a lot of teachers from BU being involved in the NYU program, or some of them with Harvard, a lot of them with Georgetown. So I think the factor that ended up being a big process was I had my aunt and uncle living here in New Jersey, and I was talking to them about what law schools I should be looking at. And they really thought that BU was a good idea for someone looking to be in the East Coast. I sort of ended up having that choice. I mean, I wouldn't say it was like free from external factors, because BU is kind of pretty like generous with the amount of aid it offers its students. So financial consideration in the US is a big thing,
of course,
because a lot of people do think US universities are a little more expensive, which is true. But I think they sort of equalize it in terms of they provide more financial aid than, let's say, a lot of UK universities who are more likely to give financial aid on a merit. I mean, not that BU doesn't do it on a merit basis, but BU also takes into consideration like a needs basis. So it's a bit of both. Like if you have good grades and you need the money, they're probably going to take you.
All right, so that's something that both you and Trisha have spoken about, and we'll move on to financial aid and scholarships later on in the session. But for now, I'd like to move to you, Anmol. What were your thoughts about shortlisting universities? We'll come back to your program-specific expectations later on in the session, but why Boston, and what were the other universities which you were looking at?
Mine was a slightly unconventional route because I knew that I wanted to work here in the US. And so for the longest time, I was applying to JD schools. And so BU obviously was a consideration then. The ranking and the brand name and everything else doesn't change because BU law in itself is prestigious. So one of the reasons that I knew that I wanted to apply to BU law was because it offered a large range of courses, and within that, the curriculum was very diverse. I was looking it up. I was looking at it in terms of job opportunities and what it provided me. I was looking at the alumni base. It was initially a JD consideration, but then COVID happened, and I knew that I wanted to consider what would happen 1 year later rather than 3 years later in terms of getting a job. And BU offered me that flexibility because it essentially reached out to me and said, well, we also think you're very fit for the LLM program. And if you want to consider it, that's something that you can do. And we will also offer this option of transferring to the JD should you have the requisite grades. And well, obviously it's difficult to do that. There's 1 or 2 students every year that manage to do it. But that's what appealed to me, having BU offering the most flexibility in a number of, my colleagues have already sort of explained a lot of the financial aid bit of it, but just even generally, I think It offered a large amount of courses. It offered this flexibility of switching to JD. It had a huge alumni base. There were a lot of people that were accessible to us even before we joined the course. So the opportunity to talk to them and get their input on what their options after leaving BU Law were like altogether very convincing. And then more than anything else, I think talking to the actual BU Law staff really helped me. I applied to very similar schools as the other two. I basically applied to schools in big cities because I knew that I wanted to apply to a big law firm.
Okay.
I found, obviously we'll discuss this later, but most of it was the usual, the Georgetown and the George Washington universities, and essentially the top 20 law schools. But yeah, I just, if I had a takeaway for this answer, it would probably be that I think BU offers a lot of flexibility in a lot of considerations, and that was a big factor for me.
All right, thank you so much for that answer, Anmol. We'll dive a bit deeper into the courses later on into the session. But before that, let's jump into a crowdsourced question that we've received. It's the second question that we're seeing on the screen, and I'll just read it out. Between Boston and Georgetown, what would be better? Does Boston have a locational advantage? So I'll leave it to you guys, whoever feels comfortable answering this, please go ahead.
I mean, I guess I'll start, and then if they have anything to add. So I think you guys had a session with Apurva the other day, and she got into both. And so I would recommend that people do actually talk to people from Georgetown before fully analyzing the two courses, because even as I've realized after doing the course that you can talk about your course, but you can't fully capture the experience of some other course. But personally, to me, I think I picked BU first because of the financial aid. Second, it is a bigger city. Like Boston is where you want to be. It's much more student friendly. Although I would remind people that Georgetown is in DC and you want to be close to legislators and things like that. But within the courses themselves, I don't think there's a substantial difference in the way that they do it. Mostly because, one, I've seen like the teachers, at least for the tax LLM course, because Georgetown's a really good tax program. Yeah. I've seen the teachers shift, right? Like Georgetown is basically taking people from, I wouldn't say poaching, but like they're hiring people from BU. And so I don't think their course and their material differ substantially. And they sort of do the same recruitment events as well. For tax, they have tip and tear. So it's kind of like on a similar scale. I think Boston, like the screen says, like a location advantage was a big thing for me. And the other thing was, personally for me, I felt like Boston wanted me a lot more in terms of the amount of aid that they were giving, the amount of help that they were giving me before I got in, the amount of flexibility they were showing me. Because I had an issue with transcripts, and I'm assuming this is a common factor for a lot of Indian schools, apart from maybe the end schools, that transcripts are a problem. They take time, you get delayed, and the LSAC process is an issue. And I think BU was the one that was the most responsive to it. So that was the biggest reason for me.
Thank you for that answer, Parvesh. Anmol, Trisha, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, because, I mean, I agree with Parvesh in saying that, transcript is a big issue. It plays a biggest, I mean, it was a hindrance to a lot of factors when it came to applying through LSAC. Just to make the audience informed about this, LSAC is a law school admission council through which you apply in US. It's one of the platforms wherein you can just put in your application for once. Where you have to just add in the colleges where you find you have been shortlisting in these colleges, and then you can just fill it up and upload your SOP for once and LOR for once, and the LSAC makes an entire folder of it and send it through the college. So I think Boston University was very responsive about the same, rather than Georgetown in that matter, because I applied for the same. And coming to the banking finance program, I think BU is has this one of its kind in entire US. It has its inbuilt faculty in this term. So I think for me, going for Boston because I wanted to apply for, I personally don't want to go for for setting up for the bar and everything. So I wanted to be in a city where I can find companies or fintech companies and easy accessibility towards banks where I can intern. So yes, Boston is one kind of location where I could find all those things.
All right. So that justifies the locational advantage as well.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. All right. Thank you so much for that, Trisha. Anmol, it's been a year since you've graduated approximately. Am I correct?
Yeah, yeah.
So with the benefit of hindsight, what are some pros and cons of attending BU Law?
I think there's a lot of pros. I definitely attended it at a very difficult time because there was COVID. But I think, going with my theme earlier of flexibility, I think that BU has offered us the possibility of having an almost wholesome college experience, even while we were in the middle of COVID. I joined September 2020, which was literally the worst time to join. But BU offered classes in person and remotely, and that was very good for me because I found that I could use my COVID year beautifully in getting that degree. And I know that all the classes weren't in person, but they still made this massive effort to have us acclimatized with the faculty, with the administration, and Boston itself being a student city, it would have been great to actually experience it when there were a lot of colleges in person. But the very fact that BU made this effort to be flexible with us was amazing. But also, I would say a lot of pros at BU come from the amount of courses that it offers, and the content for these courses. Their faculty are a lot of practitioners that are actively practicing, and they will come in once or twice a week for class. And one of my professors was an international M&A professor who had an active practice, and so he'd only be able to make it to class for once a week. So we'd have a 3-hour class, and it was fantastic because the class was split into not just the theoretical aspect of it, but also this practical negotiation aspect. Every day we'd find ourselves be more familiar with M&A. And I actually found that applying to my work over here or to my job interviews. And so I think there's a lot of pros here. The cons are obviously that for me, it was just a terrible year to actually be doing an LLM because the actual social networking aspect of it was significantly less. Having said that, I still feel like BU tried to make the most of everything there was possible to do at the time.
Yeah.
And so I just massive points to actually helping us get through a very difficult year in the most productive way possible. Yeah.
All right. So it appears that at every juncture, they do go out of their way and are extremely responsive to most concerns.
I would say that. Yeah. And I think the staff for just the graduate programs is a small one.
Yeah.
And they're very personalized in that they reach out to you, they check in on you, and it's always great to have someone that's looking in and making sure you're doing okay through the program. So yeah.
Thank you for that, Anmol. That was an excellent answer. Let's now move to grades and academic achievements. So Parvesh, why don't you take the first one? In your experience, what are the kind of grades needed to apply for the LLM program at BU Law?
Okay, so I think this is true not just with BU, but like all American universities. I think the rest of the world is much more bottom line in terms of, oh, you need a certain grade in order for you to get into a program. I don't think BU has that sort of a system. What they're really trying to, and this was something that the director of the tax program told me even at my acceptance interview of sorts, is what they're really trying to assess is your competence to keep up with the course. So they don't want you taking the course and not being able to keep up. So in terms of grades, I had okay grades. So in my law school, I was fine. So I don't think it was a big issue for me. But I know people who've had, I think in my class, anywhere between a 2.5 to a 4 GPA. So I know people with all kinds of grades. What they're really looking at is, hey, do you have an interest? For me, it was tax. So do you have an interest in tax? And have you shown some kind of ability to do it? So I had 1 year of work experience apart from taking tax as an optional in my law school.
Okay.
So I think that really swayed their decision. And so I'd applied right after I graduated, but after that, I ended up just I deferred my course because of COVID. And then I ended up getting some amount of tax experience, but so I wouldn't say tax experience is mandatory.
Okay.
But I was interning a lot and doing tax, but I think what they really want you to do is like, they don't just want you applying for a course for the sake of applying for a course. They want you to come with some sort of plan and some sort of like targeted application.
All right, thank you for that, Parvesh. I understand that tax and banking are both really specialized programs. So keeping that understanding in mind, how can future applicants build a strong CV in order to apply to these programs? You mentioned that, it's good if you demonstrate an interest towards taxation and other forms of, you include line items that are aligned with that program. So along these lines, what do you think that people can really do to build their profile for these programs? Trisha, you can take the banking one. Parvesh, why don't we talk about tax? Yeah.
Parvesh, you can go first with the tax one.
Okay, so strong CV. So what I did is I knew I wanted to do tax for my second year of law school. So what I was doing was basically interning at various tax places to try and figure out what work environment I had that I liked the best. What I think you should be doing is, because I don't think they expect people from law school to have specialized knowledge of the system. And I'm like probably an exception because I think I'm the youngest in my program. I don't know too many people that applied straight out of law school, but so I would say that there is a possibility for you to get straight out of law school without actually having any specialization, but just showing an inclination towards that subject. As for like building a strong CV, I would say if you're interested in a subject and if you want to do an LLM in it, start exploring it one way or another. Like write a paper, take the courses for sure. In your law school, you probably have like some optional course or something, or highlight it in your application that you've taken this course and you're interested in it, or do internships. I think those are the easiest ways in India to do this. What you could also be doing is, and this is something I wish I knew before I applied to the program, is you should be trying to connect with people, whether it's on LinkedIn or you can reach out to the BU staff and try and talk to graduates. So even if you don't really have some form of experience for that subject, you can always make it up by talking to them and figuring out what you could be reading to try and keep up with the course and stuff like that.
All right. And Trisha, what are your inputs on this? How can people build a strong CV for banking law?
To be very honest, when I was in my third year, I was pretty clear that what I want to do. I didn't want to go for the practice line because being a first generation student from a family in law, it is pretty difficult to establish yourself in practice and do the same thing in India. I mean that's very well established. I can go and do my independent practice, but then it takes a lot of time to establish yourself in a court when you are in India. So for me, I was pretty clear that I want to go for, for general in-house counsel or the counsels, or become a, associate general in a fintech company or a startup company or something which is related to, tech and law. So I started interning with companies like, Wipro and all these stuff, like to build my own CV. But then even I interned with big law firms in India, like, Shardul Amarchand's and Fox Mandal, and I worked with their corporate office to look better into the, the corporate line. Adding to Parvesh's answer, that you should actually, focus on what kind of research paper you want to write to contribute. You should do something which shows your interest in banking sector. I had also an opportunity to select the banking and insurance and all these corporate related subjects while I was in college. So you should definitely work on those things and holistically prepare your CV, because it's going to help you when you are applying in all, not only BU, but all the American law colleges you are going to apply. And I think that's all. that's how you build your strong CV. Grades doesn't matter, to be very honest. Grades is the not only thing which is going to matter. There are a lot of things which your CV is built on. So yeah, you can also look into my CV if you want to, which is in the LinkedIn. So yeah, it's very normal and it's very holistic. So yeah, I think that's the key to break into an American law school.
Right. Thank you for that, Trisha. Anmol, assuming that one does have average grades, in your opinion, is it possible to make up for those average grades with a well-rounded profile? I'm not suggesting that you had bad grades, but is it possible? Do you feel that people can make up for it? And if so, what are the kind of co-curricular activities and internships that they should be targeting?
Absolutely. I don't think I have bad grades, but in general, I met with a lot of people just generally and discussed this before I applied to any LLM program or JD program. And I think the overwhelming response to this is there isn't a straitjacket answer, but I've seen a lot of things actually work out for this. So obviously, the most cliched path through it is doing a bunch of really good, diverse internships.
Yeah.
But along with that, I feel like research papers are important. There's a lot of people that have a declared concentration very much in advance. I definitely wasn't one of those people. I know that I spent forever figuring out what I wanted to do in law. But I've met a lot of people that had this version of a declared concentration very early on. And I found them taking on startups and doing something with it, or taking on that path and doing different activities for it. So if it was ever mediation or ADR, I'd find people taking part in ADR tournaments, and they'd get accredited, they'd take on outside projects. And so I think what the answer to this is, if you figured out what you want to do, hone in on it and see it through. And that declared concentration is something that will really come out in your application cover letters, because then you're showing the world, this is what I've actually focused on, this is what I'm passionate about. And it makes for a wonderful application because it shows you're focused on one thing, you're committed to it, and you want to see a future in it. If you're not, that's absolutely not a bad sign if you don't have a declared concentration, because that's what general LLMs are for.
Yeah.
And being a general LLM student, I am biased towards it because I feel like it gave me an option to try all the things I liked doing and excel in them in my own way and take them forward as much as I wanted to take them forward. And what that makes for is a diverse cover letter to your firm jobs that can be molded in whatever way you want to get the type of job that you want to apply to. So in a nutshell, I feel like co-curricular activities there's 300 options out there. And it's just going to take you going down and actually researching and figuring out what it is that you want to do. But internships are not the be all end all of it. Clerkships are not the be all end all of it. You can do whatever you want to do as long as it's committed to it, there's hard work put in it, and there's something you can show for it.
All right. Thank you for that. Take a quick pause. If anyone in the audience has any questions, you can unmute yourself. You can use the chat box, whatever works for you, and you can participate in the discussion. Just take a 2 minutes.
If I could actually add on to her answer before the co-curricular thing.
Sorry, I missed that.
So the thing I think, which I agree with her, is definitely I would say there isn't any activity too small, and anything that you enjoy eventually ends up becoming important in ways that you can't see. So for instance, like I used to competitively debate in college. So I used to go around a lot of, and the competitive debating scene is kind of like big in India. So I used to go to different end schools, and like I've even like done well in a couple of those things. I think those sort of things make you interesting. Like the other thing I did when I was a kid is I used to write, I took like the competitive music exams that's conducted by like Trinity. And I mean, you never know, like just pursue interest, and that makes you, in one way or another, it makes you a more interesting candidate. Like I didn't do debating because I was looking at doing an LLM program in the future, because it has nothing to do with tax.
Of course.
But I think even moot courts are a good example of this, right? Like you do it because you enjoy it, and then it just ends up working out because if you enjoy it enough, you start doing well in it. And then you look at it, it's the small things that separate you as candidates. Like some people just look more interesting on paper than other people. So it doesn't necessarily need to be, because I think, of course, you could like excel academically and then do all your internships and have work experience and get there. That is one way.
Yeah.
But for me, when I applied, the only real thing that I could do was excel academically. And I had like internships, but internships don't really teach you as much. I think they care much more about, like beyond a point, they care much more about the kind of candidate they're taking. So.
All right, thank you for that.
Yeah, adding to, I mean, Parvesh's answer, like I wrote in my CV when I was applying to BU, there was a lot of things like, you know, which happens in your college, like being a convener of some event. You know, these things really matter. These things show your leadership qualities, that you organized an event or something like you. I mean, I have been convener of like, you know, of my college in a lot of things. I have been editor to a lot of, you know, inside colleges, magazines, biannual letters. So these things actually show how much you were involved, not only in your academics, but also in the other things in your college. Even I remember I wrote in my SOP that apart from the studies, I'm a well-trained Indian dancer. So these things really matter. I mean, as a person, it shows how all-rounder you are and how well managed you are. So I think everybody should, you know, focus not only on grades, but other things apart from internships, apart from other things. So yeah, these things really matter when you are putting up your SOP and college applications.
All right, guys. Yeah, great answers from all of you. Thank you so much for that. We have a question in the chat. It's from Jinal Shah. I'll just read it out to you. How do we present our internship experience being a motivation to do further studies apart from the recommendation letter that we get? Whoever wants to take this up first, whoever's comfortable, please go ahead.
I can take this. I mean, how do we, because this happened with me, how do we present our internship experience being a motivation to do further studies apart from recommendation letter? Yeah. So as I previously also said that, look, you should be very clear from your very beginning of your law school. Why were you motivated to go to law school? It is not because CLAT was easy or the college was offering you an acceptance. It should not be like that. It's like why you need to make a difference between why you want it and what is the need of doing it. So when you are applying for, I have seen it in India, like people run towards internship. I mean, if somebody is going to do an internship in a big firm, oh, I will also go and do an internship in a big firm. It's not like that. What you're focused on, do that. What is in your need, do that. I mean, it should be seen as like, why were you motivated to do that internship? It should not be like that, okay, my friend did it, so I went and did it. You should not be like that. You should understand the basic foundation of that. So apart from the letter of recommendation, I would say that you should focus on what kind of internships you are doing. Like supposedly for the tax program, if you want to go in, search for practicing tax lawyers in India, start interning with them. It doesn't matter if they are small or they are big. It is going to help in your CV in future. I mean, for me, when it came to banking, I started finding out internships in all the banking institutions back in India. If not banking institution worked out, I started looking for, you know, fintech companies which were in India, like Wipro, Deloitte, and Goldman Sachs, and all these companies. So you need to search for these internships and start motivating yourself that, okay, this is how it is. Even if you do not have that kind of internship, and you did internships in district courts, or, you know, in high courts or in the lower courts, or you have like more of your internships toward litigation and you want to go in banking sector, it actually doesn't matter till the time you're showing your motivation towards the program in your SOP. So I just giving an example, like I started my SOP with, you know, saying that I watched this movie, A Few Good Men, and I got motivated. So it doesn't matter how you are presenting, how you are showing your CV as. Just focus on how you present yourself and how you are motivated towards it. So yeah, that's what sums up my answer.
All right, thank you for that, Trisha. Jinal, I hope that answers your question. If you have a follow-up, you can use the chat box, or again, you can unmute yourself. All right. Okay, we have a follow-up. Also, as you mentioned, you guys being trained singers and dancers, I have an arts and crafts business and tutor should that be presented, and how can I relate it to, okay, it hasn't been completed, but I'm assuming how can it be linked to the application?
Parvesh,
So,
do you want to take this?
Parvesh, yeah, please want to.
Okay. Okay. So I probably have a response to that internship part as well. So I'll start with that, and then we'll get to the singer dancer thing. So the internship stuff, I think the way internships, if they help you, if at all, is it gives you the confidence to know what you're talking about when you're writing something related to the subject in your SOP. The other big thing with your internship is you gain a lot of lessons and clarity about issues, like social issues regarding that subject. So for me, a big part of tax was like, I didn't like India's tax policy with retroactive taxation and like them going after Vodafone and other giants by sort of like taxing them after the transactions have been done and like much later. So that was a big issue that I was able to highlight as like, oh, that's a big motivation to me. Or like things like an individual taxpayer coming and you can see how they're wronged by the system. And that gives you motivation to actually keep doing this, apart from like love for the subject. But of course, like love for the subject is much better when you can say, I like the subject because of these things. And I've worked in it, so I know these things, and I know what I'm talking about. So even if it's not to them, at least it gives yourself a sense of like confidence that you know what you're talking about and you're not just writing words. As for this arts and crafts thing, I would say the answer is sort of similar, right? What you're trying to do is you include it, of course, like it's kind of important. But what you're trying to do is you're trying to relate to lessons that you get. So you're trying to use this kind of stuff to define the kind of person you are. So for me, debating, I used to be like, oh, that really helped my analytical thinking. That really helped me be quick on my feet. And of course, as a lawyer, you all want to have good like oratory skills. So it's a no-brainer. Music, I did add, but you could always be like, oh, I'm a creative individual or I'm a driven individual because I see through these tasks. I put in the hours. I'm dedicated once I enjoy something. Arts and crafts, like I don't know the specifics of your business, but you could always like think about what sort of lessons you're learning. What sort of, if you were to put it on your resume, what parts of that would you emphasize apart from the technical skills? And of course, it helps if like you're in an arts and crafts business and you're an accountant at the arts and crafts business, you're doing the accounting and you're applying for the tax program, like that's a direct correlation. But apart from that, I would say like sort of think about what you learned from that. What in that experience defines you? What sort of like characteristics you get from
if
it?
I may just elaborate, so that you can answer me specifically. So the thing is, I started it as my hobby, and then people started liking me and started giving me orders. So then I thought, like, why not just create a business out of it as a part-time business?
Yeah.
So that's how it all started. So I have been designing, maintaining the accounts, promoting, advertising, and everything that is required in and around it. So yeah, that's it. So how may I relate it to the course, or does it actually show some skills that I can emphasize on?
Sure, of course it does, right? So first, obviously, it shows initiative. So obviously, like if someone like you like it and people seem to think you're good at it, you took it up, and that's like initiative and risk that a lot of people don't do. And of course, you've probably got like some business acumen skills from running a business, and if you're doing the books of accounts and you're applying for the tax program, yeah, I know how to work with numbers. I'm good at that and stuff like that. Depends on the program you're applying for. Even if it doesn't have too much to do with law, you could be, because I think the biggest misconception probably is that of course, they're looking for your competence in these sort of subjects, but really you don't know these subjects until you actually sit down in class and learn them, because they are fresh concepts. Even as like I did a lot of tax before I came here, and a lot of the tax here I don't know. The only thing that really helped was knowing the concept of capital gains, which translates. But apart from that, I don't know the tax. So what they're really looking at is like, oh, are you eager to learn and are you competent? Like you should be able to absorb information. That's really what they're looking at. So any sort of extracurricular stuff, like say, hey, I run a business. I think that's really cool. I think that a lot of lawyers, because they also are looking for people with diverse backgrounds. So I definitely say like emphasize stuff like that for sure.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
All right, then. So let's move on now. Let's move a bit into the LLM program itself at BU Law. So Anmol, firstly, could you tell us what's the classroom experience like at BU Law? What's the classroom experience in terms of, do you guys study with the JD students, and what are different aspects of it?
Sure. I think I think it's an excellent classroom experience. We're allowed, like I said, I don't think I can speak for my colleagues here because I don't know what their experiences have been like, but I know that for the American Law program, we had over 200 courses available to us as offered. A couple of them were LLM only. I think a majority of them were JD courses, which had LLM classes available for them as well. I had this, I think I mentioned before that I had this idea that I might want to transfer to the JD. So it was important also to me to be part of those JD classes. I think if anyone's looking for a job in the US, a certain comparison in terms of grades and in terms of classroom experience to JD students is more important, because then you can speak to it in your interviews, and you can basically say, well, look, this is how I fared in the JD class, which is why I found myself taking your fundamental JD classes with JD students, like contracts and corporations. But I coupled that with a couple of LLM only classes to get exposure to very specialized topics like international M&A that I was talking about, because what a couple of LLM classes offer to you is a more global perspective on things rather than just the US aspect of it. So international M&A related to people from all different countries coming and sharing their experiences about the M&A process, and then exploring the US M&A process, which to me was very helpful. But then at the same time, I was also studying privacy with a JD seminar, which was 20 people in the class. And I was also studying corporations, which was, a big 120 people class with all the JD students, because it's a foundational course. So all in all, I think BU offers a very different kinds of classroom experiences, and it's up to you what you want to choose. And if you're the kind of person that prefers attention in smaller classes, then pick more seminars. If you like the authentic classroom experience we're used to in India, because there's so many people in general, then maybe corporations is your way to go. It obviously also depends on what you want to do with your career and where you see yourself going. But the beauty of it is there's 200 courses available. You can pick and choose whatever you want. You can combine it with whatever you want. And, so it really is your own individual path up there. And I think you can make the most of it, honestly. So the experience in itself was awesome. The professors also are very good. I think the JD professors are very used to having LLMs in their classes. I think every year they get more used to us. And so they're acclimatized to what our problems may or may not be. And I think they often tend to pay special attention to a lot of LLM students to make sure they are keeping up with, because it's not like English is all of our first languages. I find that in India, for Indians, it tends to be a first language, but not for a lot of other LLM students. So they do give you special attention in that they'll check on you a little more often. They'll have a TA you can talk to and ask questions. So honestly, I think there's just 20 opportunities to excel in, regardless of what class you take up.
Thank you for that, Anmol. And just to build up on that, what's the size and diversity of the LLM cohort? I ask you this question. I think Trisha would be in a better position to answer this because she's still there at the moment. What's the size of the cohort and what's the diversity of it? I ask you this question in context of the number of courses that are offered. How many students are actually, competing against each other for these courses?
If you ask me about the three of the courses, I think tax program has, 30 to 35 people, if I'm not wrong, Parvesh. Yeah, I'm right. And American Law program has the highest ones, like they are 200 and count. and 200 to 180 to 200. The banking are like 30 to 35 again. So yeah, so the size, this is the generalized size of the class, but then you generally don't feel crowded in the classroom. You have your own individuality when you sit in the class and attend a classroom. So that's what I like about BU. I mean, I never feel that I am sitting with JD people or like LLM people. Like in banking also, there are many courses which we share with the JD people. So yes, there is a lot about the individuality and your own personality. So coming to the diversity, I think from Asia there are 44% of people who are in the classroom, and I mean that's a surprising figure. Whereas from the other ones like Africa, Asia, we have a little bit of percentages. So yes, this is how the size and diversity in the LLM cohort goes on.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Parvesh, so what are the different ways in which students in the LLM cohort can choose specialized courses at BU Law? I understand that there are concentrations, there are tracks. So what are these mechanisms? And moreover, what are the pros and cons of choosing specialized courses, choosing these specialized tracks and concentrations?
Okay, so I think there are two ways to do this, right? So I think one is you take a specialized program like I did with tax or banking, for instance, and they're a separate course in itself. And I think the other way that you can do this is you can take the American law program and then choose a specialization. So you can take like IP courses. I know a couple of people that are doing IP, a couple of people that are doing corporate law. And I guess in your transcript, they reflect that you did these sort of subjects, or like you have this sort of inclination. So if you're, I think the advice is, if you're unsure, if you just want to do like commercial law, for instance, and you don't know what you really want to do and you want to explore a lot of things, I would say probably do the American law program. So you have more flexibility, because at the end of the day, I think you can and pick a lot of the specialized concentration.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure about all of them. So I haven't seen any American law program in my partnership tax class, for example. So they probably do want to see your competence, but as to the actual specialized courses, I would say those particular ones you're doing based on interest, and you're doing based on what you want to work in the future. Like I've not seen too many. I mean, it is possible that you could switch, and of course you should like stay. If you're not interested in something, switch. Like don't stay there. But it is. I would say if you're gonna spend like how much ever for an LLM, you should be a little more like sure that at least this is something you want to explore.
Yeah.
For the pros and cons, I think each of them are different. One of the things that I would say is employment, for instance, is different in each course, right? Okay. So for tax, it's much easier because we have like big four firms that are willing to sponsor your visa. And this is going to be a big issue for everyone who doesn't know already. Visa sponsorship is your biggest obstacle to get over. So you have big fours that sponsor your visa and don't require you to have a bar license. But if you're taking other courses, I don't know how it is in banking, but for American law program, for example, what you really want to focus on is pick a state you want to do the bar exam in if you want to stay here, and start knocking down the course requirements, because there are separate course requirements for each bar exam. The pros, the advantage though of specialized courses, for instance, for like tax, what I really like is one, it's knowledge that you won't get anywhere else. Like all of these practitioners, people who are working in the field, come into our class and they say they all took the LLM program at one point because this is a pertinent issue that no one in the industry understands. So they had to take the course in order to understand those kind of things. And this is true. Like this is information that you're expected to know, but you don't necessarily know unless you take the course. The second advantage is, like, I think personally, you're around so many people who are interested in the same kind of stuff. So it's like people just making other people better. And the third thing is, because some of these teachers have been in the field for so long and been in the industry for so long, their reach is like crazy. Like the tax program, I think at BU is the oldest tax LLM program in America. So BU students are everywhere. Like they're at different colleges, they're at different places. And even if they're not, like we have a professor who works in the IRS and he's been around so much, and he's worked with the New York program and Harvard program. So he just knows someone. If you need to get in touch with someone, like he can put you in touch with someone. The cons, of course, are like every specialized course, right? Like you could always end up doing it and hating it. So you better like make an informed decision. So.
All right, thank you for that, Parvesh. Let's now dive a bit deeper into the 3 areas of law that we've identified for this session, starting with American law. All right, so Anmol, can you walk us through the different facets of the American law program, the kind of experience that you've had, and what were the factors which you considered in choosing the American law program?
So I covered a little bit of this before, but primarily my reason for choosing the American law program was because I felt like I didn't have the focus to hone in on one particular specialization. I was aware of this specialization dichotomy in choosing courses and following a concentration within the American law program, which is what I eventually did.
Yeah.
I did my concentration in international business law. And I found that I wanted to take the American law program because I wanted to try a couple of courses, a couple of different ones. And like I said, I ended up taking the foundational JD courses like contracts and corporations. But I also ended up taking classes like negotiations, which were small 20 people classes that gave me real-time experience. I know I had a general idea that I didn't want to do litigation. I wanted to work in the corporate law field. I knew that I wanted a big law firm job. And so to that extent, I knew that there was some semblance of a direction over there. And I followed through with that in the courses that I picked. And like Parvesh correctly pointed out, to some extent, the bar exam does drive your course selection.
Yeah.
So there are certain courses that you need to take to pass to be eligible to give the bar exam, essentially. And for that, you need to take courses like professional responsibility. You have certain foundational course requirements that you need to meet, certain credit requirements that you need to meet. So, well, in terms of choosing the American law program, I chose it because it offered these options to me, just a lot of options to choose from, but also because, I'm sorry.
Just hold on for 1 second.
No.
I will go ahead and mute the audience once again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it just essentially, I feel like if you're looking for options, if you're not entirely sure about where you want to go yet, but you have a general idea, the general LLM gives you this option of like exploring different things, speaking to your professors who are very well-versed practitioners in the field, and getting exposed to all the things that it has to expose you to. And if you're in that situation, which is completely acceptable at the ripe old age of 22, you know, it's what you're going to end up doing. And I think there's nothing wrong at all with doing a general LLM, just because of the amount of opportunities it'll offer you. You know, so yeah, that's my primary reason for taking it. I also was looking at it from a transfer JD perspective. I was looking at it from getting a big law firm job, you know, and so obviously your factors can be different than mine, but these are definitely the core factors for me. Yeah.
Great. So just to build up on that, do you feel that the American law program, did it play a role in you securing the role of a law clerk? I believe it's a law clerk, right? Am I getting it?
Yeah,
right?
Until you get admitted into the bar, you're a law clerk. And then the minute you get admitted, you're an associate. So I've passed the bar exam. I just haven't gotten around to submitting my application yet.
Do you think that the American law program played a role in you securing the position of a law clerk with Davis Polk?
I think it did, in a lot of ways. I think it exposed me to, first of all, I feel like the professors and basically being part of those classes exposed me to what the American system was like. I feel like if I had walked into interviews without having any knowledge of what was going on here or how people worked or how people, simple language problems, not even grammatically, but the fact that you're not supposed to address them as sir, is things that you learn from classes like this. Yeah. We have a different culture in India. It's going to, not everything translates to work over here. But those are obviously just semantics. I think the bigger aspect of it is the classes actually exposed me to case law over here. They exposed me to different types of laws over here, professional responsibility. A lot of the content that we learned in class was content that was tested on the bar. So in terms of taking the bar, that was helpful. Additionally, outside of just class content, I think what really helped me is networking with people that were part of the American law program, right? And I reached out to so many of them to get their advice on it. It's not always easy as an LLM to get a job because you're competing against JD students, but to talk to people that have been able to, that have gone down the same route as you have and have gotten it right.
Absolutely.
Has been incredibly, it was always very helpful because they could always point out to me what worked for them and what didn't. And that to me helped me. And eventually those are the people that I reached out to for mock interviews when I had this job offer. And honestly, I think all of it just sort of builds up. So it's not just the course content, but it's what the course offers you. It's how the course has built over the years. It's the alumni this course, prepared and has out in the world. And all of it came together to help me get this job. So I definitely am greatly indebted to the course for getting the job. Yeah.
All right, but what if someone weren't planning on walking down the route of seeking employment in the US? What if they were planning to come back to their home country after graduation? Do you feel that in that scenario, the American law program will contribute to their career?
For sure. I mean, for starters, you have an additional degree. You have a master's degree.
Of course.
Yeah, and I think that is looked at very favorably in the kind of jobs that are available in India. Obviously, like, it depends on where you're applying, but across the board, having an LLM is extremely prestigious, and that applies to all schools you apply to. What also helps is you having the ability to say, I have now had 1 year of exposure to the US legal system, so I can speak to it, which is something very few people honestly can say. As much as all of us, there's so many students applying LLMs each year. When you look at it in the grander scheme of things, or the people that you're working with at these law firms in India or in a litigation job, there aren't too many of us out there. So the global exposure that you'll have gained in this program over here, the contacts that you've created across the world, the understanding of this American legal system and like everything that it brings forth, or how lawyers work over here, or what works for them and what doesn't, or what their hours are even. All of that adds up and will make you an asset to whatever firm / internship / job you're joining in India, because you will have something to add that most people at that job will probably not have statistically,
Yeah, does set you apart, does add a little bit of
in
your application. All right, thank you so much for that, Anmol. Let's now come to the graduate tax program. Parvesh, I believe we've pretty much covered the first part of this question in covering your reasons for applying to the program. So let's move to the second part of this question. So did you ever consider applying for the online mode of education for the tax program, especially since there's a pandemic going on and a lot of different online options are being offered?
Personally, no, but I get it if you are afraid of traveling during COVID. It's perfectly understandable if you want to do online. I know people that do it online. So personally, the reason I didn't want to do it is because I wanted to network, like Anmol was saying. It's something that was in the back of my head, and I was, plus when I applied, it was right during the peak of the pandemic. So my biggest thing was I wanted to try and stay here after. So I didn't want to do it during the pandemic because I know no one is going to hire as well at the end of that period. So I decided, okay, let me wait it out for a year, see how it goes. But if you're like, it depends on your goals, right? Like if you want it for the education, I don't think you lack by going online. I think you don't have to pay the living expenditure. Maybe it's less. I think it's less. I need to confirm this again, but and you don't have to, like, especially if you have another job and you just want to learn, that's a great idea. And I know the professors interact the same amount, like they get on Zoom calls, they respond to your emails. If you want to talk to them at any point, they do. I think last semester we even had this thing where they would organize info sessions. So all the online students can come on Zoom and ask their questions, and even the residential students would participate. So there are ways to communicate and like figure out talking to people. You could always message them and things like that. I don't think in terms of a learning experience, there's any like significant difference. The difference comes in like what your goals are after and how personalized you want the program, like whether you want to meet people, whether you want to stay in Boston, because Boston's a great city. Yeah, that's your biggest factor, I think.
And how has Boston's status as a tax hub contributed to your experience in the LLM program? I ask you this question in context of the kind of opportunities that tax lawyers can avail of in the city.
Yeah. I think the two biggest factors, and this is something I've figured out much more recently, is Boston has a small legal community, which means it's much easier to network with the people here. And the other biggest, so if you know like 10 people, these 10 people probably know everyone in the legal community. You just need to, like, whether it's through a second or third connection, you just need to figure it out and talk to their friends who know their friends. And it's very easy to do that. Like, but in New York, for instance, like the place is just so huge that it takes a while. The other biggest advantage of Boston being a small legal community is your professors are mostly, at least for the tax program, a lot of them are partners or retired partners of the Big Four or are doing tax litigation stuff here. So if you know your professors will connect you to anyone at any firm. And they're pretty open to talking. They're pretty open to giving advice and figuring out this career stuff, especially. So I would say Boston is probably the uniqueness is it's still a big city. It still has a lot of jobs. It still wants a lot of people. And at the same time, it's easy to crack through as opposed to New York, who have like a ton of schools, a ton of JD candidates, a ton of LLM people, even from like NYU. So that way, Boston is huge. And BU, of course, like I think in Boston, there are 3 prestigious schools. It's BU, Harvard, and MIT. So that way it has like a stellar reputation in Boston.
All right, thank you for that, Parvesh. Let's now move on to the third part, banking and financial law. So Trisha, let's jump into a crowdsourced question that we've received on this first, and then we can move to our questions. I'll just read it out. Thoughts about the banking LLM at George Washington University Law School. Would US be better than Europe for banking programs from the point of view of jobs?
Sorry. Personally, I got an admission from George Washington University Law, and I was looking for banking law only. Yeah. But then, to be honest, they did not offer me any kind of scholarship, so it was pretty difficult for me to go there and to establish myself. This is the one thing which I already cleared in my previous answer, but I want to clear this out in this answer also. That in US, when you enter, your college name does not. I mean, the rank does not matter. Even if you're from George Washington, you will land up into job maybe because I'm not there. But when you are in Boston University, you have an inclusive and an exclusive environment to grow with. So for me, I mean, now you get a live example. Like I did George Washington University, not because of the scholarship only, but then a lot of things were there that the cost of living was higher and everything. Even that was my backup option, but Boston University was on the very first of it. Right. So I think, yeah. So I think I'm not sure about the banking program of the George Washington, but I'm pretty sure about the banking program which has been offered in BU. Yeah. Coming to the second part of the question, would US be better than Europe for banking programs from the point of view of jobs? Definitely. Because I would add to Parvesh's answer only that Boston has a very strategic position as to the location in terms of networking and in terms of connecting with your professors. I mean, Boston University gives you that kind of comfortability and flexibility, which helps you to connect with people here. Europe was my secondary location to go in. If I would have not got into US, I would have landed up into Europe. But then Europe was not my first hand because first was the language barrier. because it takes a lot of time to connect with the professors, and it takes a lot of time to come out of that comfortability zone with when there is a language barrier, right?
Yeah.
Second was the high cost of living. I mean, dollar is much more less than the euros. Euros is still touching a level in the Indian market. So I think for me, adjusting with my budget was more than looking into the quality education. So therefore, I chose US in that terms.
And what about the opportunities that Boston offers in the field of banking law? Particularly, are externship options easily available to candidates at BU Law?
Yes, definitely. I mean, personally, I just have started my school, and Boston University has its own included professional development office, wherein you can set up interviews with professional developers at any point of the week, given time, and you can talk to them what kind of opportunity you are looking forward, what kind of career you are looking forward, what kind of what kind of jobs you are looking forward. And Boston, in that term, it has a lot of banking structures here, financial institutions over here, and the externships and internships, whatever you want in the terms of banking. So in my opinion, my CV got built up by the professional developers. So yes, right now I'm not in that eligibility criteria to apply for the internships. After the semester, I'm going to apply, and I'm very positive that I'll be getting one. So yes, Boston in terms of jobs, it's a go place. I mean, yeah.
All right. I wish you the best of luck for those internships.
Thank you.
And for the moment, let's move to work experience. All right. So what we're seeing on the screen right now is a small snippet from the brochure that Boston University issues. I'll just read it out. In the banking program, because everyone has work experience, the level of discussion is more in depth. So based on this snippet and based on your own experience, do you feel that work experience is an absolute must for students who are applying for the banking program? And how did your own experience at HDFC Ergo, how did it contribute to your education at BU Law?
To be honest, I do not suggest people to straight away go and apply for banking programs or corporate programs without work experience. You should have some kind of work experience. You should show some kind of motivation towards your degree or the masters you're going to pursue in future.
Right.
Because it actually helps you to compare yourself with the peers you're going to sit with in that LLM program. So my experience with HDFC, because since it's a semi-financial institution back in India, it helped me a lot, because I was in the corporate sector and as well as the litigation sector. So it helped me build up my both side of my career. So it gave me a perspective how the corporate field works out, how do financial institutions look into the services, transactions, and everything. So I think working experience is something which gives you an in-depth knowledge when you're sitting in an LLM class, especially for banking law. I do not know about my other colleagues who are in the tax program and the American program, but in banking program, yes, because I still remember I was sitting in my in my class for the first day, and there were people who had experience of like 5 years, 6 years, 2 years, 1 year, and I'm one of the most youngest one with like 2 years of experience in the banking field. So you get to know a lot from your professors, from your peers, and it's like a it's a beautiful environment in which you grow in. So yes, working experience, I think, matters a lot when you're applying for banking and finance program.
All right, thank you for that, Trisha. Anmol, Parvesh, I'd love to hear your inputs about this. What do you feel? Do you think it makes sense to apply right out of law school for your programs?
I think I could take this first.
Sure.
I don't think there's at least for the American law program, I don't think there's work experience required per se.
Okay.
I know that most of my classmates had some semblance of work experience. It depended on where they came from, but a lot of the Indians in the program did have work experience. I did not. To me, this seemed like an opportunity to use my COVID year really well, rather than, because I graduated out of NUJS in 2020, and most people that I had around me were not going to begin their work until January. So from May to January, I saw this, I mean, because of COVID and everything not going back in person, I remember thinking, well, I be done with a degree by May. I might as well do the degree. As long as my motivations may be over here, I think the bigger fact is that, at least in terms of the American law program, it's not going to be harder for you to understand something simply because you don't have the work experience for it. I think it has a lot to do with how Indian law is slightly different from US law. There's obviously a lot of overlapping concepts and they will apply, but I don't think your work experience is like concretely or substantively affecting the amount of knowledge you're going to bring to these class discussions. At most, you will be able to participate more in these in class discussions, but I didn't find that to be a problem for myself personally. Obviously, I think a lot of people do disagree with that. People like to get work experience, and it's definitely great if you know where you're going, if you know what you want to do. If you know you're going to practice corporate law, I think it will make for a good law school application to have that work experience. And eventually, in terms of getting jobs, it's going to be helpful to have that work experience in the field that you're applying to a job for. So if you're building your track record, I think it would help to get that work experience. But again, I don't think it's a massive disadvantage not to have it.
Yeah, that's fair. I understand your perspective since it is a general LLM program. But what about you, Parvesh? Do you feel that there is a different position that applies for tax law because it is definitely a more specialized field? Yeah.
I would say no. I agree with Anmol, but I would qualify it by saying you need to know tax. So I don't think you only get it through work experience. Like if you showed an interest in tax, if you know your basic concepts, you're okay. You don't need to know the law in depth. You just need to know the things that they're talking about. So if someone says depreciation, you need to know what that is. Or if they say capital gains, you need to know what that is. I don't think it's a big problem if you don't, because they're probably going to teach it to you anyway. But some of these professors move past basic concepts much quicker because there are like much more stuff to explore in depth. So it helps for your sake to keep pace with the course. It helps to know it.
All right.
Do I think work experience is important for that? I don't think so, because I applied straight out of law school. I was pretty confident that I could have managed straight out of law school. It's probably like program dependent. And of course, it's some level of individual opinion, right? Like some people just feel more comfortable learning stuff that they think that they already know or that they've worked in. But personally, I think it doesn't translate. So like Indian law is different, and it's important to remember that it is different. So if you're doing the work experience thinking that I'm gonna know way more for this program or that it's gonna help me excel in the program, that's probably not how it's gonna help you. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I understand your points. Since it's not directly translatable, I don't think it makes sense directly. But yeah, from an understanding perspective, it would make sense to have some basics in place.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I just have a question for Pravesh. Can I just interrupt? I am Tanishka.
Sure, please go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, Pravesh. I'm Tanishka, and I would just want to know that people who have work experience, say I have work experience in tax, and I know for a fact that the laws would be different, but when it comes to the technical understanding, I would be able to understand. So having a work experience, not having a work experience, according to what you and Anmol said, it won't make a major of a difference. But does work experience in any sort help in getting a scholarship? Is that going to be a point which would be considered by the college when they think of providing any scholarship to the candidates who are applying at the law program?
Maybe it does, but I didn't have any work experience when I applied, and I got their maximum scholarship amount. So I don't think it's a definitive factor. Like it probably does round out your application better, but if you have a good enough application independent of work experience, I think you'll be fine. Because at the time I applied, all I had under my in my resume were a bunch of internships in tax and like debating and moves to tax moves. So all I had was like an interest in tax, not really work experience in tax. And they seem to, I do think the bigger factor for them is once they like the candidate, the bigger factor is need-based. And I've noticed American schools do this. I'm not sure if BU does it, but what other schools like US try to do is try to match the fee that everyone's paying, because international students get a higher fee than domestic students. And what schools are trying to do with their aid and funding is trying to reduce so that everyone essentially pays the same amount of fee. So I don't think it's, I'm sure it does play a part because they're looking at your resume holistically. Personally, for me, I didn't have any experience going into it when I applied. My experience came after because I deferred for a year. So I don't think it's determining, like it probably does help your application, but it's definitely not, like you're not doomed if you don't have work experiences.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right, since we're already talking about scholarships and financial aid, I think we can just take that section on first and then come back to the section on the New York bar. So firstly, let's look at the cost of the program. This is a screenshot that we have from the university's website. It just breaks down the different costs that are involved, and there's an aggregate sum of around $81,000, a substantial sum, but as Parvesh pointed out, the university does offer scholarships and financial aid. So let's just look at the basic processes that are involved and the kind of aid that people can expect. So firstly, what's the process for applying for financial aid at BU Law? And as an estimate, how much aid can people expect? Parvesh, why don't you take this one first?
So if you're applying through LSAC, all I had to do was, there's a bunch of boxes there that say, do you need financial aid, yes or no? And you just say, yes, I need financial aid. And I think there's a separate, and there's a separate sort of like essay that you can write, I think, for the financial aid.
The last when I applied, there was a letter which you had to attach for the financial assistance. Okay.
So basically, it's sort of inherent in your application. You don't really need to do much while filling out the application. Just fill out your application fully, and they'll consider you for financial aid. So how much can students expect? So I think the numbers were something like 5,000 to 30,000, and 30,000 being the maximum. And in fact, that was one of the biggest reasons for picking BU for me, because I was talking to a bunch of friends who are doing PhD programs of, like, not law, like science. And they said, yeah, they're giving you a good scholarship, which means they really want you there. It felt nice to be needed, so.
Yeah. All right. So next up is the process for scholarships, the merit-based scholarships. And does Boston University provide full scholarships? So Anmol, why don't you take this one?
I don't think there's a need to apply for these scholarships, at least for the American law program. I didn't apply for a scholarship and I received one, as did most of my friends. It's based on merit. I don't think they give full scholarships. Please feel free to correct me, guys. But they are very significant scholarships. I think it goes up to more than half of your fee, which is saying a lot. So I mean, that's what it is with the LLM program. You don't actually need to apply. You will be given, based on your credentials.
Okay, great. So a very simplified process then. And what's the situation like this year, Trisha? How many students in the LLM cohort have received scholarships? Based on a rough estimate, I understand this is a slightly unfair question to ask students, but yeah, we'll work with what we have right now.
I mean, I am not aware of everyone, but then, the banking program only had selected 3 people for the spring this time.
All right.
And I think it was, 3 of us who all got the scholarship, but the amount varied according to your experience, according to your CV, according to everything, whatever the admission office has looked into. I personally got a partial scholarship, so which was a big help to my budget. So yes, I think a majority of students do get the scholarship depending upon how well your application is.
Great, excellent. That's a huge burden of most people. Yeah. All right, so let's take a step back, and now we can talk about the New York bar exam, a big motivation for a lot of people who apply for an LLM. So Anmol, let's start with you first. I understand that you recently passed the New York bar. First off, congratulations, tremendous achievement. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
So on that note, do you mind taking us through the different requirements that international students must fulfill in order to become eligible for taking the bar? And secondly, is there a time limit for writing it after, after you've graduated with an LLM? How does the process work?
Right. So there's a lot of requirements, and BU also provides like a professional development handbook that will outline every single thing for every different state bar.
Right.
The requirements vary depending on which state's bar you're writing.
Yeah.
There is a uniform bar exam. So the exam like score applies to a bunch of states, but every state also has different course requirements that you need to meet. So in essence, when you basically join BU, which is sometime around September, if you're taking the fall semester,
Yeah.
is around the time that the New York bar will expect you to send in your credentials from law school. So your first step will be to submit all your law school credentials from India. And then throughout the program, you're expected to meet certain course requirements. So it's a certain amount of credits, I think somewhere between 15 to 20. That you have to meet. And what that basically means is there's certain courses that are foundational and you are required to take them. They've like listed what courses are accepted and you have to have done like an X amount of those courses. So those courses are foundational things like constitutional law, contracts, corporations, and essentially stuff like that. And so you'll have to take a couple of those courses to it's up to you what you take, but you have to take a couple of those courses to be eligible to take New York bar. One of a few of the courses that are compulsory to take regardless of what else you're taking is an introduction to American law class, which BU makes compulsory anyway.
Okay.
And if you're taking the New York bar, there's a professional responsibility and ethics class that is required to be taken. It's mandatory. If you're giving the bar in Massachusetts, there are more stringent requirements because you'll be required to take constitutional law and civil procedure as well. BU helps you with all of this because at the beginning of your semester, you'll have these consultations where they help you choose the courses that you want to take based on the motivations that you have. So right before you choose your courses, you'll be talking to like a director in the program that will basically go through your suggested course list, basically ask you, do you plan to take the New York bar? Because here are the courses you might have to take because of that. And so it helps you make sure that you're on track to reach all the courses that you need to reach to get there. And then after you're done with BU, you're probably going to have to give these two different exams, the MPRE and the NYLE, which are smaller exams on professional responsibility and on New York law in particular. And then there's the bar exam. So that's obviously a requirement towards passing it. And after all of that is done, you make an application, which is, I'm sorry,
What is pending for you,
process. What?
Which is what is pending for you, I believe, right now.
Yeah. It requires moral character certificates, school affirmation. It's a fairly lengthy process. But in essence, through your time at BU Law, you just need to make sure you meet these course requirements. And to some extent, make sure that you give the NYLE and MPRE as soon as you can, which are the smaller exams. In terms of time limit, I'm not dead sure about this, but I believe you have to give the bar exam within 5 years of graduating.
All right.
I think if you have further questions on it, you can reach out to BU. There's an email ID for it. But yeah, it's all given in their professional development handbook. It's what we follow.
All right, so you've already dealt with the kind of guidance that BU Law provides to its students, but just to take a step back on specializations. So in your experience, what would be an appropriate program choice for students who want to write the New York bar? For instance, should you be taking a more general kind of a course selection? Should you be going for a specialized LLM? What's your take on that?
I'm totally biased towards the American law program, but only because it offers a lot of course options. Yeah. So you'll have the option to take on whatever you want. I, however, don't have exposure to banking or tax, so I don't exactly know what kind of courses that are available. I knew that I had to give the New York bar exam, and this would definitely offer me the opportunity to like sit in on those JD classes and those foundational courses, make sure I have a spot in them. So to that extent, yes, I would definitely recommend the American law program for most courses. Yeah.
All right. Thank you for that.
I mean, I mean, I can answer for the banking one. Yes, banking program also provides you for bar courses, which are mandatory as said by Anmol, like professional responsibility, ethics class, constitutional class. The professional I said that. I mean, these are the important courses which banking law program also provides for the students who wants to take up New York bar exam or the other bar exams. So it's like, for me, it's easy for me to flip anytime whenever I want to take a bar exam or if I want to go for the job.
All right, thank you for that, Anmol and Trisha. Parvesh, in your opinion and experience, do you feel that it's possible for international students to find opportunities without taking the bar? Because that's the most standard route, but what if you don't want to take it?
Yeah, in tax, yes. I don't know about the other ones. The problem is with tax, I would say, if you want to take the New York bar exam, I'm not biased towards the American law program, but I would say take the American law program because so you already have 6 courses in tax, and it's going to be really difficult to keep up with these 6 courses in tax. Like the big 4 that are probably going to hire you don't really require you to have a license. They're probably going to hire you regardless. You just need to show competence. Okay. So the tax program is not particularly the best way to go if you want to write the bar exam, if you want to write the New York bar exam. That being said, I know there is a provision that they let you like swap some of your courses and they can apply those credits towards your tax program. I mean, there is a way to do it. I would say get in touch. If you want to write the bar exam, you get in touch with the people, the director of the program almost immediately as soon as you join, before you pick your courses. So she puts you in the appropriate courses. There isn't, like, once you get into picking the subjects, you don't get the option of like doing bar courses like the other 2 programs. Like, you need to ask them specifically to do it. In terms of opportunities, yes. I think tax is one of the few. I've heard, I don't know how well it is, how many students get employed from the other programs, but tax is one of the few programs where you don't have to be a CPA, you don't have to take the bar, your LLM is good enough. It helps if you have a bar license. Like, I know a couple of people from my class my program who did a JD, and they cleared the California and the New York bar. So it helps. It definitely does help. But a lot of these accounting firms don't really care because you're not really going to argue anything before court. You're not actually practicing law. You're just giving like tax law advice. Okay. So your opportunities are limited in the sense that you're probably going to do tax advisory and tax planning. You're not going to do tax litigation. If you want to do tax litigation, most of these places still require you to write the bar. So yeah.
All right. So that's always an option later on as well. Once you work for a few years, you can always explore that option if you feel the need for it.
Yeah, and it is same for the banking program as well, that you always do not require the bar license for sitting up for the interview and all these stuff. So it is mostly similar or synonymous to the graduate tax program. So you can you always have that option of just ditching the bar like I'm doing and going for the job and just being an in-house counsel or a general counsel for a company. That's it.
I'll just add to that for a second and say that I think for at least the American law program, most of us intend to give the bar if we intend to stay in the US. But I got my job before I sat for the bar exam. I would just say for people that are still looking for jobs, at the point they're giving the bar exam is a plus. Having passed it, it is definitely a huge plus in getting a job. Yeah.
Okay, guys, thank you so much for your answers. That brings us to the last section of today's session. And after that, we can just take on any questions from the attendees. We have a couple of questions lined up in the chat as well. We can take those on after we're done with it. So Anmol, I think you would be the best person to answer this because you graduated. So in your experience, how has the LLM really contributed to your career as an attorney?
Holistically, with so many different things, everything from being able to understand. I think the BU program was just a great transition from Indian to American culture. Right. And this is a very general line, but it basically says it exposed me to the work culture over here in a safe environment before I went into the US job market.
Okay.
I say that because preparing under actual practitioners and having the opportunity to network and talk to them gave me a lot of exposure as to what to expect over here. The courses obviously were a huge plus in everything, even though their actual content would probably not apply to a lot of our work product, depending on what we're working in. The fact that we could understand how the US system works, because we've just been so used to the Indian system. And you have like this year to adapt to understanding it, adapt to the terminology, adapt to basically the mindset over here. I think it's almost important to have this LLM experience to be able to transition into the US firm culture. In terms of my career, as I mentioned before, I think BU's network was most fantastic. So reaching out to all these people was wholesome for me. That was the most important part, just reaching out to BU alumni. But separately, I feel like it also just helped in terms of like the professional development office helping you with your resume, with your cover letter, or just people at BU with their 20 years of experience with students, seeing how you're going to pan out or what you should do based on your interests. And I think all in all, it makes you confident of being successful in the US.
Okay.
And it takes that fear of, well, I'm not used to this place out of you if you have that. But that's just a couple of things. I feel like it's a very big answer to give, but it's a couple of the highlights, at least from my experience.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Anmol. Parvesh, Trisha, let's take on the last question. So what would be your advice to future applicants for obtaining an LLM?
If you ask me personally, because I just applied last year and I came here it's been 2 months over here. So the advice which I would give to the future applicants is that understand what is your need and what is you want. So there has to be a difference between your need and want, as I said previously. The second thing, choose your college wisely, choose your budget wisely. I mean, in the end of the day, you are going to pay for your law school, even if it is through your education loan or even it is through your money. So choose how well that college is going to serve you after next 5 years. The third thing I would say, choose your location wisely. I mean, I have seen my friends going to UK, I have seen my friends going to Europe, but then I think I haven't seen them being so pretty successful. Like I have seen it in USA. There will be a lot of people in the, around you will be pulling you down that who goes and do an LLM in USA. It's only for people who want to sit for the New York bar exam. And there are a lot of, there are a lot of things which are going to pull you down. But then, you should believe in yourself. The one thing which is there, that you should believe in yourself. BU is going to help you in each and everything. Trust me, even I had my, I had my fear that I'm going to come to a new country. I don't know anything. How will I do it? It's a new college culture and everything. But then, to be very honest, it like Anmol said, that graduate program is a very small cohort of people. So it's like a family. There is going to be a mother, there's going to be a father, like there is Lauren to me, who is a mother to me, and there is father that is Mary. So they're going to help you with each and everything, from your selection of course to how you go about which subject is going to help you, how you're going to land up to a job, how you build your CV. Every single handout is there, every single mail is going to come in your inbox. It's just that you need to check, just that you need to believe. So this is the thing which I think I would give an advice to the future applicants.
All right, thank you for that. And Parvesh, what's your take on it? Yeah.
So I think I really just have one thing that I would have liked to know before I started the process, and I found out like now. It's that your LLM program isn't actually 9 months. It is 9 months, but what you're trying to do is maximize the time. So what you need to start is, you need to have goals like in your head of what you want to do with the program, especially if you want to stay here long term. That's something that you need to start working on right now. Like you need to start networking. You need to talk to people either in the program or seniors. There are a lot of Indian LLM graduates who are working at various firms. Like get in touch with them, talk to them about their experience. And I think it's important to start figuring out stuff before you're there. because for me, the process was really abrupt. I wasn't really sure whether I was coming and stuff like that. So it took me a couple of months to get the pace. And I think you do have to start playing catch up a lot if you're trying to figure stuff out here a lot. What you ideally want to be doing the first month is just like adjusting to the culture. But you don't want to be figuring out stuff about the program, figuring out the resources that you have, figuring out your path within the first month. I think it's something you should be thinking about before you get here.
Okay.
So that you can translate to like whatever goals you have, even if it's India, right? Like even if you want to go back, what you want to do is figure out which subjects help you the best. But you need to, like, I don't think being indecisive does you well, because it's difficult to shift goals if you're indecisive, I think. Because if you want to stay here and you take a lot of domestic subjects, like subjects that help you with American law, they're not going to translate as well. So if you're taking a lot of international tax courses, that's probably going to help with both. But again, like if you get here with the plan of going, I know a couple of people doing other programs who got here with the plan of like, oh, I just want to do the program and go back, and now really like the place and want to stay here.
Right.
I think that's a little more difficult to do. So yeah.
Great. So that brings us to the end of my questions. We just have a couple more questions. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, since we were discussing about the scholarship, I missed out on one very important point. I mean, when I was, I think I was in the last month, I think, of my, preparation while I was catching up with my flights and everything. That was the time, there are a lot of things which people do not tell you about. BU does offer part-time jobs, wherein you can, manage your living expenses and your fooding expenses. So if you land up here in BU, there is an entire different link which has been given, via which you can send in your CVs to any of the dining halls, any of the, wherever the vacancies come in. You can have an on-campus job and you can work for a few months till the time you are figuring out your expenses. So you can just, have a part-time, and, you can get, approximately towards a minimum wage of $15 per hour. And you can work accordingly, and you can pay your rent and your fooding expenses. So yeah, you can manage that as well in your tuition fees.
Oh, that's excellent. Thank you for that, Trisha. I'm sure that will be very useful information for future applicants as well. We just have a couple more questions in the chat. Parvesh, this is something that you had already spoken of, so I'll let you take this one. Can an average student with 70 to 80% of marks apply to Boston?
Yes. Okay, so here's my answer. I think your grades are, like, thinking of grades as bottom line is a very like European or Australian concept. I don't think the US thinks of it that way. So they're really looking at all of your they're looking at your application holistically. Like if you could have average grades and like a really good resume, or like you're an industry leader. I'm not saying you have to be, but like you would still get a good scholarship, you'd still get in. So I don't think it's a huge problem. That being said, I don't know if I can like definitively tell you how much grades play a part. From personal experience, all I can tell you is I just took one tax course in college and I still got in. So I don't think they're looking at academics as much, but I didn't necessarily struggle with the tax course, and I didn't do, like, I was fine academically. So I don't know if my application process is a good enough reflection. Like, I don't know if my personal experience is a good enough reflection. But from what I've seen from other people in the tax program, I don't think grades matter as much. Like, it's a very like European, much more like European schools are much more bottom line about this than American ones are. So.
Excellent. I hope that answers your question, Komal. Just the final question from Jinal is, so the experience can definitely help in getting upper hand in job applications, right? Anmol, would you like to take this one?
Sure, yeah. I mean, like I mentioned, there's no one way to get the right job, but if you have a recurring theme of having worked in a particular field and you're applying for a job in the same field here, it will most certainly help you a lot more than somebody without experience, such as myself. really your job application really boils down to what your grade in law school over here is, because they will compare it to the JD students. That's all they have to compare. They really can't use your Indian grades because it's comparing apples to oranges. So they will look at your grade, they will look at your transcript, they will also look at your work experience, because your work experience is essentially saying, here's what I have to bring to the table that a JD student probably won't be able to do. And you'll say, well, I have specialization in, say, this law or that law, and I learned it in India, and look, I learned it over here. And in the end, it's going to be your work cover letter in your job application, where you tie together your experiences, regardless of whether they're internships or actual job work experience. And it's how that cover letter comes out and how it reads to people that are reading them that's going to determine whether you get that job or not. So I definitely think it's in short, I think it's definitely advantageous to have that extra experience, just because it will help you in the future to justify why you make a good fit for the job over your other competitive applicants.
Also adding to that point, I mean, I think interview also sometimes matter a lot. I mean, the BU University is definitely going to help you with that by polishing your interviewing skills as well, how you present yourself in front of the company. So yeah, these are the things which actually matters a lot.
Yeah, I like how BU Law actually goes out of its way for a lot of these things in each little aspect. They do seem to go the extra mile. All right, so that brings us to the end of the questions for today. Just two things before we proceed. Number one, the next session is on 2nd April. That's a Saturday at 12:30 p.m. And secondly, if any of you in the attendees want to expedite the process for the waiver, you can use the email ID that I've mentioned in the chat, which is info@collegeate.org, and you can reach out to us. We will do our best to expedite the process for the waiver. All right, so thank you guys. Thank you so much for taking our time. The answers were all excellent, and I really enjoyed speaking with you today. So thank you, Anmol, Parvesh, and Trisha. It was a great experience.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us. It was really fun. Thank you.